Hey, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Change Physician Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, with my co-host, Dr. Melissa Cady. And on today's episode, what we are going to be talking about is mindset versus numbers, or mindset versus money. I'm not exactly sure.
What's the right number for happiness?
What's the right number? Or is the number our happiness, or is it a mindset that's happiness? And I think that's the big debate. This came out of a discussion that we were having just before we started hitting the record button. And you think about your career, and as you're progressing, and particularly when you're starting to look about things about, well, what do I need to retire? Or what do I need, if we're not going to use that term, because I'm not a huge fan of the retirement term where you stop and just do who knows what, paint figurines or something. But really when you're financially independent. And so what is that number, and what does it require for you to be safe? Because for us in my household, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. And the weird thing is I keep finding that number moves all over the place. So I would like to have your opinion on that, Dr. Cady, because I think the number is never static. I think as you get older and as your priorities shift, or maybe there's new dynamic, maybe you have kids like I do, maybe you're kind of thinking about them, you're thinking about legacy and all this stuff. What I've really kind of discovered is that it becomes this moving goalpost. And so over the last couple of days, what I've been really thinking about, is it really so much about a number, or is it about a particular mindset to have where we feel either a sense of safety, like we at the point where we are stable, and if something should occur, we will still feel safe in that scenario. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting because I think I got this strange thought of just like what you grew up with too. Like what was your kind of your baseline? What is your, measurement? What are you basing it or comparing it against? And so I guess the question is, is your mindset or expectations or desires or dreams or goals based against the backdrop of what you didn't have growing up, or what your parents' influence on the expectations of what you would achieve later in life? Or is it based on your neighbors and your peers and what you're trying to kind of keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak? But I also think so as an example, and I brought this up a couple times in the past, is, you go through residency, you're making, when you look at the hours, you're making probably less than a teacher. And that's not saying a lot because teachers aren't making what they should be making. So when you're making, I guess now I have to look and see what people are making now. But back then, I think I recall making 30, 40,000 in that range, working nearly like 2 full-time jobs, essentially as a resident. Your expectation is that you won't be struggling, like, from a freedom for time, which you are definitely don't have that freedom for yourself. But the number that I looked at was 10,000 a month. And that was kind of like, wow, I've never made that. But it never was like my primary, like money wasn't necessarily my motivator. It was a sense of safety when you achieve a certain amount. And I think it also depends on, so that was before I owned a home. And so that was very like, there's plenty of money left over because you're just renting and you don't have to worry about extra expenses. But then when you are in a marriage or in a relationship, there's somehow, I don't know what it is about when you're in a relationship. It's like you go and do things together more, you go travel together, and you have more excuses to spend money together. And it's a little bit easier to kind of control that, like, you're the only one that really is in control of the situation if you're single. So there's a little bit less fluctuation there, unless you have two people that are very like, frugal and just, don't want to spend any money. So I think, after I bought a home, I still was pretty modest, or I think it was a pretty reasonable cost that I spent on a home, and kind of a middle income type of cost. there's still somehow you end up spending more money, of course, than if you're renting like an apartment. Even though you're building equity and all that good stuff. So I think I pushed the goalpost a little bit, to use your analogy. Once I kind of was in a relationship, wanted to travel more with the second person and in a home. So I think there still is a baseline, kind of like my part-time expectation of a salary. There is a number that makes me feel comfortable. Anything beyond that's great, but it's not my driving force in what I do. Now, would I love to get paid twice what I get paid for doing what I do now? Of course. But I think there is a little shifting, but I don't think I'm not motivated by having to keep up with everyone else. I mean, I want to take pride in the things I have, or what, my own home and all that, but I'm not the one that thinks 100% I don't love every single thing about this neighborhood or this and that. I mean, I'm very happy with where I'm at. I have no desire to go and sell this house and buy another house with exorbitant prices in Austin, Texas. So I think I try to be practical. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that I have a general feeling of my goal of comfort, so that I can have the ability to have some, disposable income on top of my responsibilities. So have I taken on a little bit extra, leveraging of debt and whatnot to acquire or do things for the house? Yeah, maybe I've pushed that a little bit, but I still feel like it's still like I can still manage it within my minimal expectation to keep myself happy. But not that I'm not, open to discovering different ways of making additional income, but I think my number's still pretty close. It's more than what I was in residency, but I don't think it's out of, I'm definitely not on the high end of anesthesiologist salaries. I'll just put it that way.
Well, I think we're kind of talking about a couple different things here, because there's like your.
I know you gave me a smirk, so I was trying to figure out what.
Because there's your present, right?
Yes.
In the day to day, there is a specific amount of some sort of income. We'll just call cash flow, right? And that cash flow enough to keep you feeling out of the lack, right? Because we don't want to be in the sense of lack, where I'm lacking, or then you're stressed. I can't make the bills, or I don't have enough in case there's an emergency. That lack kind of mentality, where it's extraordinarily difficult to get out of from a societal standpoint, because you cannot focus and think long term, right?
Yeah.
So there's a number, you're out of the lack, and then there's the number where you're comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I do think that one for physicians kind of varies all over the place. That it is really contingent on what you view as your quote unquote lifestyle. Where do you need to be? If you need to buy, and I'm going to totally date myself, and also demonstrate my what is that called? What's the thing where they buy all the fancy stuff? Fancy clothes. I can't even remember the name. The fashion sense, right?
Oh yeah.
Because I don't know anything about fashion. I go to Costco. That's my place. I love Costco. So I'm going to say, if you're someone who needs to buy Armani, because that's one of the things, or Gucci handbags all the time, because that's another name that I know, that number is going to change. But okay, so we got lack number, where anything below
survival.
That's survival number.
Yeah.
Then you have the number where that kind of comfort, where you are on a day-to-day basis, you are in this comfortable zone. And then that number can change quite a bit depending on what your lifestyle is. Yeah. But what I was kind of thinking is the more the long term, because we're thinking at something as, think about the FIRE movement, financially independent, retire early, or just be financially independent. And it's about being in control. So now then we're trying to find a number which then returns on an average basis amount of cash flow that keeps you at your number of comfort. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that keeps moving for me, because then you start going, well, how that number will never be stable, right? Unlike a job per se, where if you're in a secure position, or you are in doing something where your actions are producing some sort of income, or you're in a business venture where you're generating income, that sort of passivity, which is the big goal. Everybody's, oh, passive, passive, passive. That fluctuates so much, right? And then you're thinking about market forces, and it can obviously go up quite a bit. It can go down quite a bit. But I think there's, at least from a personal standpoint, I tend to look at this stuff from a sense, and I don't even know where this came from. There's a sense of uncertainty there, right? Okay, well, it's this number. Well, if this number is going to be your number where now you have this return, this expectation, and you kind of think about whether you retire numbers, they always throw around the 4% rule. Like once you've had, which is 25 times whatever that number is. So 25 times 10,000 a month would roughly give you, it's like 3 point something million, about 3 million mark is where you're saying that you should be. Well, 3 million. And then if you're withdrawing 4% of that portfolio, it should theoretically, like 95% of the time, it's going to last you for your entire life. But then you're always thinking, well, what if the market crashes? Well, then the number starts to change, right? So then, okay, wait a second. It's not just this number. Now I need to double it, because what's the worst kind of crash that we can think of where it loses 50% of your market value? And it's just been an interesting perspective, because I keep seeing how these numbers are fluctuating. And I finally came to this conclusion yesterday. I don't think that'll ever change. Like, if you're always focusing on a specific number, or you're moving from this kind of extrinsic idea that there's something extrinsic to you, yourself, your whatever, that you need in order to feel safe, I'm not sure if you will ever obtain that. Because whether we're talking 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million, 15 million, there's always these external variables that are going to come in and kind of influence that. So maybe, I guess what I'm seeking is this idea of what I think it's Nassim Taleb talks about as anti-fragility, where it's beyond resiliency. It's the fact that you're stress testing yourself in such a way that you can recover from. And so it's just been a very pensive weekend, I should say, because I keep looking at these numbers. I think about numbers, and part of it was precipitated by wine. That's the other thing.
Now, what kind of wine?
Well, so we have some wine that we bought for the kids, right? It's one of the dumb things that you should never do, but look at their birth year. And then there's, we buy wines about their birth year. It was some thing, and doesn't never really work well, because what if your kids don't like wine? Then you have all this wine. But I was looking there's some bottles I have that were actually pre-kids. And I was looking at what they're worth, and I was like, holy crap, this is worth a lot of money now.
Wow. And
then you're like, well, what am I going to, I bought this, like one specific bottle I bought, and I said, when we achieve this goal, we're going to drink this bottle of wine. Well, we achieved that goal. We never drank the bottle of wine. And so I set the goalposts again. I moved it again, because this external thing, right? And for whatever reason, this external thing has to be the number for which we can drink this special bottle. I say this bottle of champagne. And then that happened. And then you move it again. And then I was looking at it this weekend again, and this whole thing, all these ideas are going to me. And then I was like, well, am I ever going to want to drink this bottle? Because at this point, it keeps going up in value. And all I can see is, if I'm going to, there's something that I bought for X amount of dollars is this amount of dollars. Am I going to just drink it? And then you start adding all this other stuff. Well, how do you drink it? Who do you drink it with? I don't know if it's between my wife and I'm not sure if we can actually finish this bottle. So then we would be wasting this thing. And, it's champagne, so it doesn't stay a long time. So it's just been, man, it's been a tough, pensive weekend thinking about all these extrinsic things, and just coming to the realization this is something
first world problems.
I have to shift in my mindset. My mindset I need to work on my mindset rather than the money, rather than this external thing, because I don't think that's ever, as long as I keep looking externally, that will never get fixed.
Yeah. And besides, are you really going to get money for that valuable wine? Are you going to sell it to somebody?
No.
So it's, you just make it a forever. Special occasion.
I'm very good at hoarding things. I'm a very good hoarder.
But, sometimes there's value to that, but it's
really.
one thing I
would say not necessarily really, because ultimately, here's the other thing. You look at life, and it comes down to experience, right? Your life is a measure of experiences. So what this bottle then is
It's to celebrate that experience.
To celebrate an experience, but I keep moving the celebratory experience number. Like, what do I need for this number? I don't know. It's bizarro.
But sometimes if hoarding in general is not necessarily a great thing overall if it's becoming a problem or in the way. But if there's a certain item that you're like, holy cow, I just hit the jackpot and I'm going to cash it in and sell it and I'm going to get some money for it, then you just capitalized on a gain there that you might as well take that money, put it somewhere good to grow in a different way, or, use it for something you've wanted. I mean, like you said, life is filled with experiences and you don't know how long that, the hyphen is, or I shouldn't say the hyphen, how many years are in that hyphen on your tombstone. Sometimes you just have to enjoy some of the pleasures and things in life, because numbers are just numbers and things are just things and you can't take them with you.
I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about the hyphen. I love that. Because what if you're on your gravestone is the hyphen has some predetermined length determined by years, right? And so as you live longer, the hyphen gets bigger.
A long life has a long hyphen.
You're like, oh, look at that gravestone. It's got a long hyphen. Yeah.
And those numbers matter because they determine how much time you have to enjoy the things you want to do and not just work yourself down into the ground, but actually find pleasurable things. I was thinking about how the pandemic revealed the essentials and the true needs and the survival number that shifted down. Like, what's the minimal I need to make to get through these next couple months without being able to work doing anesthesia for elective surgery? Like during that time frame, that was kind of a critical, what can I do to leverage to negotiate pushing back some payments. And so you can find a way to survive, and that number did drop. And I took pleasure in the fact that I had kind of just downtime to reflect and just do other things that I hadn't been, doing. So, it is just a number and it does change, but that anti-fragility and resilient type of approach is that you adapt and go with the flow and, pursue things that bring you happiness. Like we were talking earlier before we went on, just like, what brings you joy, and you might as well do those things that bring you joy. And hopefully at least you meet the survival number.
Well, that is but I would see even then it's that intrinsic versus extrinsic. So there is a basic survival number. And as physicians are very privileged in that number, that survival number is significantly less. And the few physicians that are in that point where they're feeling like they're having to survive probably need to have a little bit of a perspective shift. And I recognize people who are coming out with tremendous amount of debt. Mm-hmm. But in the same token, I can guarantee you as a physician, the job stability associated with it is significantly better than people who are living in the lack, right? I mean, I don't know what your homeless situation is where you are, but it's pretty disconcerting to me to see the numbers of easily seen homeless, because we know that they were there and then you couldn't see, they were sort of like invisible, but now it's getting to the point where it is so much more visible. That's disconcerting to me. Yes. So we don't have to, as physicians per se, we don't necessarily have to worry about that. And that's a privilege. And again, you said first world problems earlier, and that's definitely something to appreciate. These are definitely first world problems that we're thinking about, because we don't have to worry about feeding our kids in general. Yeah. But even with that, there's that perceptual, that little mindset shift of, well, okay, if the pandemic comes and we have this income instability or issues, and physicians were, because they were closing down hospitals and stopping clinic flow, and there was these bumps in the revenue stream. It's still somewhat of a mindset of, do I have the inert stuff to recover? How do I view it like you did, where you're kind of readjusting, versus that extrinsic perception, which, again, you see that as very fearful. And I guess I've been really kind of shocked at how much work I've done on my own personal mindset and perspective and personal growth. And I still have a default to looking extrinsically for these things. Mm-hmm. And it's just something I need to address. Like I don't think if you're always looking external and you have these external points, you may never, ever get to the point where you feel quote unquote safe. Right. So,
yeah. Now you asked about just this whole thing about homeless, and it's actually terrible in Austin. In fact, I heard rumor that I haven't really looked it up, but that there's going to be some kind of vote on like, because people have tents up everywhere, like every like highway under the, roads. I mean, there's just like communities of homeless people, and it's just really, it's just a sad situation that, the fact that we're, having to deal with this. And of course, the pandemic, we aren't surprised that this has become a bigger issue. We've always had some homeless, but now it's like everywhere you look, it's just everywhere. I mean, you can't avoid it. But it's like you want to have compassion for it, but at the same time, it's a difficult, very complex situation to address. Were you going to say something?
Well, yeah, we should maybe end this episode and we could talk about this, I think, in a future episode, because I think there's some important repercussions there. But I just want to one thing about the homeless situation in the United States is, to me, it's an absolute embarrassment.
Yeah.
Where we are in this country with this issue is so absurd. And the only time, like, because we do the same, one of the exits that I exit quite often off the freeway, there's a huge encampment on there. Mm-hmm. And every time I look at it, I feel like this is the only time I've seen something similar to this is when I'm in a third world nation. Mm-hmm. And it is absolutely atrocious that in this country, with the amount of wealth that we have as a country, that we're still, that we're dealing with this. And it certainly seems worse than it's ever been. But I think we should do another episode on that, because there's a whole lot of repercussions from a physician standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a societal standpoint. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think we could probably end with the idea. First of all, I wanted to say that most of our debt as physicians is nearly free money that you can pay over the long term. It may feel like it never leaves you, but it's most time you can pay, reasonably manageable amounts at 1 or 2, or if you're in a bad case scenario, 3% or something. But it's it's a leveraged debt. It's a smart debt. Like you said, there's a lot of stability in finding jobs for most people that are board certified, and so utilizing smart debt is good if it is getting you to the goals you want to achieve. But I think reminding ourselves that we do have a lot of first world problems, that a little bit of perspective shifting. And I think that is something that you have to be mindful of and reflect on, because I think we all sometimes need reminders of, maybe our perspective is slightly different than the average person. It shifts with our new lifestyles, and it's easy to kind of lose sight or perspective. So that being said, I think that there's a lot for us to talk about other issues. And I'm sure that it would be actually interesting to maybe bring in somebody who helps from a medical standpoint. I know there are people trying to help the homeless situation, but it is a societal issue that we should tackle with another conversation. So unless you have anything else, I'll take us out.
Take us out, Captain.
All right. Well, I'm Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor on the Changed Physician podcast, and I'm here with my awesome co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro out of Oregon. I won't say Oregonian. I'll probably say it all wrong. And I'm out here in Texas. So thanks for joining us again on an episode of The Changed Physician. If you haven't heard about us, came across us, you can go to thechangedphysician.com and join our community. Even if you're a physician ally, you can still be part of this community. We encourage you. We'd love any feedback. Feel free to, comment, share any of our podcast venues with any of your friends or colleagues, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.